Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on? Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. It is Tuesday, April 7th. My name is Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always. We are still quarantined in our houses. We'll probably be doing that for the next month or so.
Yeah, I'm still in the bunker. Who knows when I'll leave?
I'm so bored. So bored. But in our boredom, we get to talk about fantasy freaking football.
There we go.
We've got a lot to get to in this episode. We're going to give you a short news segment, and then we're going to start our rankings on the wide receiver position for this week. We've done quarterbacks and running backs, I believe, so far. So we're going to give you our top 12 today, and then the rest of the top 24 on Thursday. But before we get into the news, check out our website, thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the FFChamps on Twitter, at the Fantasy Champions on Instagram. Be sure to go over to facebook.com/thefantasychampions and like us there. Subscribe wherever you listen, leave a review, and share this podcast with your friends. Let's get to the news. So a lot of questions have been surrounding Tua because of, I think he had a hip injury. Is that right?
He did. He had a major hip injury and surgery.
So he said he feels 100%, and he said if there was a game tomorrow, he could play. So
okay,
that's good news. Apparently, there are reports that Tua is falling down draft boards.
I would love that.
So that would be fan-freaking-tastic. Who takes Tua at this point? I've heard people really the Dolphins have been floated. Yeah,
I mean, if it's not the Dolphins, I think the Chargers want Justin Herbert. I don't know. If he falls past, I think, what is that? The 5, wherever the Chargers are picking 5 or 6. If he falls below that, I don't know. I think maybe a team will take a risk on him. Maybe a team with an aging quarterback in the first round is like, why is this guy dropping?
Packers,
like a team like the Steelers or the Packers,
Patriots.
Or Saints.
Yeah.
Patriots don't even have an aging quarterback. they
just got rid of it. They just need a quarterback.
Yeah.
I think for a guy that it was tank for Tua at the beginning of last season, and everyone was saying the Bengals were tanking for Tua. They were like 0-5, and it completely flipped, and now it's Joe Burrow. And Tua's fallen down draft boards, and I think the talent that was supposed to be the first overall pick is now he could end up in the teens. If that's the case, somebody's going to get a real freaking good quarterback. I love Tua, so I'm biased, but anyway.
Yeah.
Free agent Antonio Brown was shown catching 50-yard passes from Lamar Jackson. I think the Ravens would be a perfect fit for Antonio Brown, considering the Ravens and the way they are, and Antonio Brown the way he is.
I mean,
in fact, that whole division really.
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna do it.
Except for Cincinnati, they're soft.
Even with like Hollywood Brown there, his cousin. I still don't think the Ravens.
Is it really his cousin?
Yes, that Hollywood Brown is Antonio Brown's cousin.
Oh Lord, good luck.
But I don't think the Ravens want to do that.
I don't know that Antonio Brown finds a team. I was kind of surprised by that.
No, I'm not. I don't think I would be surprised if he does find a team. I don't think he's going to play.
He also just signed or hired a sports agent, Ed,
which is a good step though if he does want to return.
Yeah.
The
Chiefs restructured Sammy Watkins' contract. The last I heard that they were going to cut Sammy Watkins or trade him. So the fact that they are. Did you hear how much cap space they have?
No.
$177.
Dollars. Oh gosh.
Yeah. So I think restructuring Watkins' contract is an effort to save money. They're trying. They have to sign Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. When
to
the
a
day they sign Mahomes,
$500 million. That team is a mess. It's going to be a disaster.
Yeah. Once they sign Mahomes, it's going to be real hard. They'll have to build from. They'll probably have a 2 or 3 year period where they're not very good football team like the Packers were.
Yeah.
Even the Patriots. Like from like 2009 to like
Yeah.
2013, the Patriots had a run where they were like 10-6 only because of Brady and Belichick. I think it's going to be similar with the Chiefs once they sign Mahomes to that big deal. They'll have to restructure the whole team.
Yeah. We'll have to see what happens with that. I think that's all the news we have for today, other than our update on the Patriots quarterback situation, which is still bleak.
Yeah.
And sad. I got a question for you. Do you see any fantasy relevance at the Patriots quarterback position in the next coming like 2 years?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. Brady wasn't a good fantasy option, so
no. Yeah.
I don't know that any quarterback in that system, unless it's Tua, is worth looking at for fantasy options.
Tua might in a few years.
So let's move on to our wide receiver rankings, part 1. We're going to talk about, as I stated earlier, our top 12 wide receivers. Now, we both agreed that we both had this sentiment doing our wide receiver rankings that it was very hard to do the top 12. And that these are probably going to change drastically as the offseason goes along.
Especially when we go deeper into this list, too.
Some of the guys I have on here are guys that I really don't fully like, but they're also ridiculously talented. And I don't know that you can rank them any lower than the top 12, any higher than the top. No, any lower than outside of the top 12 is what I meant to say. Yeah, there you go. I was getting there. But yeah, so it was very difficult to make this list.
Yeah,
I was having a hard time.
Me as well.
So let's start up with our top 2. We both fully agree with these 2 guys. I think the more I thought about it, because I was looking at the top 2 and I'm like, man, I'm not really fully sure about it. And then as I started thinking about it, I'm like, these are just the clear 2 guys at the top.
Sure,
like you kind of have to put them there. The number 1 guy on our list, Michael Thomas. He had an absurd season. I don't know that he's going to finish as the wide receiver 1 again next year. I find that highly unlikely. But the way he played last year, there's just like he was good when Teddy Bridgewater was the quarterback and when Drew Brees was the quarterback. And so it's like, for me, like, I don't think Michael Thomas is really, when you're talking about a guy that's not dependent on the quarterback, like when Brees went down, people were worried about Michael Thomas. They were like, oh no. And I think that's when he started his stretch of 20-point games. And like, he was just absurd through this. I think it was like the last 10 weeks of the season. It was insane.
Yeah. Michael Thomas was an absolute beast last year. He had an insane season. And after the year he had, and with Drew Brees coming back, like I don't see there's not really a major change in the offense. If anything, they've gotten better. So it's hard not to put Michael Thomas number 1.
Yeah. I think what you've seen in, and I'm going to pull this up right now just to give us a clear picture, but what you've seen in the last couple years from Thomas is he was very good, but he was never a like star number 1 wide receiver. You know what I mean? He was always like a top fantasy wise. He was always a very, very high scoring receiver in regular life. But anyway, in 2019, I'm sorry, hold on. Yeah. So obviously this year he was number 1 in fantasy. Last year he was number 6. And the year before that, I believe, was the first year he broke out. He was number 6 as well. So he's always kind of been that. The year before in 2016, he was number 7. And I'll go back to 2015. Was he good then? No, he wasn't. So 2017, 2018, he was 16, 17, and 18. He was 6 or 7. And then obviously last year he was number 1. So does the number 1 continue, or does he just end up being a 6 or a 7, which is what he's been in the past?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, those first 3 years that you mentioned, those were his first 3 years of his career too. So this year was kind of his 4th year, and it was his real great breakout year. Right. I don't know. I think defenses are also going to be more focused on him. There's a lot more hype, not just fantasy wise, but like NFL wise. Like he talks a lot of smack on Twitter and stuff like that.
Michael Thomas.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
we'll see. I'm not sure if he will finish number one again, but I definitely wouldn't. I wouldn't bet on anybody else finishing number one more than Michael Thomas.
Yeah, I agree. I have this sneaking, and it might change the way I rank a little bit later. He was so good last year, but it's like
it's hard to do that again
because they signed Emmanuel Sanders, correct?
Yes.
So I mean that's way better than any other receiving options they've really had besides Michael Thomas. So I mean, not that I don't think Emmanuel Sanders is going to cut into Michael Thomas's total target percentage, but I think it's tough for me to look at players and just assume that they're going to finish. Like he'll finish in the top 3. I think that's a lock, but it does make me nervous that what if he does go back to his top 6 or 7, and then you're spending a first round pick on Michael Thomas when you could get a guy very similar to what Michael Thomas is in the 3rd or 4th round. Like, is it worth drafting Michael Thomas 1? Off your wide receiver draft board, is it worth drafting him 1?
Probably, and it'll be in the 1st round.
Right. It'll be your first pick. So it's tough. It's really tough for me. Like I want to draft. I don't generally draft wide receivers in the 1st round. I think Michael Thomas is as clear a bet as you're going to get in the 1st round at wide receiver.
Yeah.
But don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if he does do a little bit of a downward turn.
Right. Yeah.
It hurts me to say that because I don't want to be wrong, but just want to speak the facts.
It is just hard to finish number 1 back-to-back years.
Yeah. So number 2 is Davante Adams. Now Davante Adams finished this year at, I believe it was through 17 weeks. He only played how many games? I think it was like, I don't even know.
He only played, I think I want to say 11 or 10.
He played 12.
Okay, he played 12.
And so on averaging out all the games that he did play, his average was top 6 in all of fantasy. He did have some down games. I think the way that the Packers play football now is starkly contrasted to how they've played in the past. Adams was still getting his work, still getting his targets. Obviously, Rodgers still loves him. I think if he had played a full season, you would have seen him most likely finish in the top 4, I would say. So he was still a top wide receiver. I think last year he ADP'd in the top. He was like number 1, right? In the rankings?
Davante Adams was number 1 for some people. I don't know. I think Hopkins was.
Okay.
But he was number 1 or number 2.
Now, Adams is a guy that I would totally like. I might even move him up. It hurts. I'm doing this for both wide receiver and running back at this point. I might, as the offseason goes along, move him up past Michael Thomas just because I think, I honestly think that Davante Adams is going to get a lot more targets than Michael Thomas this year for some strange reason. I don't know why. But,
I do think Adams is going to get more involved than he was at least last year, because if you look at the year before, he was pretty much Michael Thomas from this past year. And then with the injuries and stuff like that and the emergence of Aaron Jones, I think Davante Adams kind of took a back seat. But I do think this year people are going to be sleeping on Davante Adams a lot, which will be a very, very good thing for Davante Adams. But I didn't even want to put him at 2. It's weird. After the year he had, I'm like, I was looking for an excuse to put somebody else up there, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it for any of these guys. So I think Davante Adams is the number 2 guy. Of what I personally think he'll do next year, not necessarily based off of what he did last year. Yeah. And the Packers didn't really do anything on offense either. They didn't bring in any other weapons, so Adams is still the guy.
So in 12 games, Adams had around 127 targets. Michael Thomas in 16 games had 186 targets, I believe. And so if you were to give Davante Adams a full, 4 extra games, he would have 40 more targets, so he would have been right around 167, 170, which is a perfect range. I do, like I said, I think you're going to see a slight decrease in the amount of usage for Michael Thomas.
Yes, I do agree with that.
So, but if Adams last year, I mean, he had 127 targets in 12 games. That's absurd.
That is a lot, yeah.
Like there are guys. I think Chris Godwin didn't even reach that number, and he played like all of his games. So, I just think that there's the amount of targets that Adams is going to get is going to, obviously be around 170. And that automatically, to me, if he stays healthy, that automatically puts him in the top 3. I don't think you can justifiably, with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, I don't think you can justifiably not put him in the top 3. So I actually would probably, as the offseason goes along, we'll see what happens. But I might even take Davante Adams. I would prefer Davante Adams over Michael Thomas in the first round. Possibly.
That's going to be a debate for a while.
Yeah. I don't know yet. Number 3 and number 4 are swapped for us. So I'll just give you both our.
I think we have the same 3, 4, 5 in different order.
Same 3, 4, 5 in different order. So I have Tyreek Hill 3, Hopkins 4, Julio 5.
I have Julio 3, Hopkins 4, Hill 5.
So let's talk about all 3 guys individually here. We'll start with Tyreek Hill. So I have Tyreek Hill 3, and you have Tyreek Hill 5. Why do you have Hill so low?
He's kind of in the mix with, honestly, all these top 5 guys. I think you'd probably agree with me. It's kind of like a tier in their own. I think it drops off after number 5. The reason I do have Hill 5, though, I think there is going to be a little bit, I don't want to say a downward spin, because it's not going to be that bad, but I don't see the Chiefs just like throwing it all over the place. I think they might draft another receiver.
Right.
They've kind of slowly are moving towards trying to run the football a little bit more as well.
Right.
And I do think Tyreek Hill is going to be fantastic. Don't get me wrong. Like, he's Tyreek Hill, and he could easily be number 3. Like, it's very close, but that's probably the reason I had number 5. I do think it's he's going to have the whole Chiefs offense, especially when it comes to the deep ball like that, I think is going to be slightly decreased.
Okay.
In their fast-paced offense.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think the explosive games that Tyreek Hill has makes him worth a second-round pick. I think that there are going to be games, if you're in on Tyreek Hill, you have to understand that there are going to be games where he's not going to get a wide receiver 1 finish. He's not uber consistent. Like you would want from like you said, you would put these top 5 in 1 tier. I actually probably would break this top 5 into 2 tiers, and I would say
you could do the top 2 and then
tier
3,
1,
4, 5.
1, 2, and then 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6. You can add into there, but I just look at Tyreek Hill as probably at this point the best of the 3, 4, and 5 that we have. And with the wide receiver position kind of spreading out, the explosive 25 to 30 point games that you can get from Tyreek Hill in half PPR, that is, that you can get from Tyreek Hill are going to be a catalyst for your fantasy team. And obviously, drafting a guy like that, you're going to need a little bit more of a consistent wide receiver 2, a guy who can come in and fill the wide receiver 2 role effectively. But I think for me, I think the youth and you look at guys like Julio Jones, old, and got a guy behind him, and you look at DeAndre Hopkins, he changed teams. So for me, I just look at Tyreek Hill, and I think as he usually we in the past we thought of Tyreek Hill as this guy who probably was just 5 or 6. And I think right now, just because of situation, because of a lot of the variables that he has included in his, he's more of a certain thing when you're drafting instead of going after a little bit more of a risk like DeAndre Hopkins or Julio Jones at this point. So that's why I put him at 3. It might change. I don't like that he's inconsistent. I hate inconsistent wide receivers, but I think at this point, everyone's inconsistent at wide receiver. You're not going to get anyone unless you get one of the top 2 that are going to be completely consistent every single week. It's tough to get that now in fantasy football as it changes. So the only concern I have with Tyreek Hill is that he played in 12 games. He obviously was injured for 4 early in the season. He averaged 7 targets a game. So he only would have probably reached 100 to 110 targets. All of his fantasy points come from those huge plays. He had 20 of his 88 targets. A quarter of his 88 targets were deep targets down the field. And so that's what makes him big. It was kind of like, I don't know if you remember during the regular season, the school of thought that you had to have a Chiefs wide receiver on your roster, because if a guy like Mecole Hardman comes in and he gets 2 targets down the field, both of them are going to be deep threats. Deep targets. And one of them is going to break off in a touchdown for 40 yards. And it's going to give you like an 11, 12, 13 fantasy point week. So Tyreek Hill is like that, but on steroids.
Yeah, no, I mean, he is. He did have a more consistent year last year, though.
Yeah,
he did the year before that.
I don't like the low amount of targets. So that's concerning to me.
I don't either.
But I understand why you put him 5. Let's talk about Hopkins. Hopkins, I have 4.
Yeah, I have him 4 as well.
Okay. So, obviously, no disagreement here. I actually switched Hopkins for Julio. I had Julio 4, and then I was like, nah, I got to move Julio down 1. I don't know what possessed me to do this. Hopkins is absurdly talented. He's very good. I think the change in team, you mentioned a couple weeks ago when we were doing our free agency show, you mentioned that, you were more concerned about Hopkins going into Arizona. That kind of rung true for me a little bit too. There's concern there to the point where I would much rather be putting him at like 6, but for a lack of talent, I would have to move Hopkins up to 4. I like him over Jones and Cooper, so I don't really have a full reason of saying this is why I put Hopkins 4. It's just he's way better than Jones and Cooper.
For me, I mean, I think Hopkins, he's somebody he's a real question mark, which is I think why I have him 4, because he could be number 2.
Right.
Heck, he could be number 1. But he could also be like Odell last year.
Yeah, right.
Where, you look at new receivers when they come to new teams. Cooper was pretty solid when he went to Dallas, but he wasn't like wide receiver number 1.
Right.
And then Odell, obviously last year, we know how that turned out. I think Hopkins will be good in Arizona, but will he be DeAndre Hopkins in Houston? Mm-hmm. He will be talent wise, but will he be statistically? I don't know. It's a different quarterback. There's whole different offense.
Yeah.
There's still Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk there. I think they're going to want to throw the ball a lot. So that is good for Hopkins, but we'll see how it plays out, which is why I think it's a question mark, which is why I don't have him higher, but I can't have him any lower, I don't think, than 4. Maybe I might put him 5, but he's just too talented.
He's the best slot receiver in the game. And I think for me, DeAndre Hopkins, obviously when you talk about Hopkins, when he was in Houston, you expected him to be a guy that got you 150 to 100 and I want to say 150 to 170 targets. And which is, obviously we've talked about in the past how that is the total that you want to reach if you're a wide receiver and you want to be in the top 3, right?
Right.
But for when you look at the numbers for Arizona, last year they targeted Christian Kirk, who was the slot receiver for the team, 108 times. They targeted Larry Fitzgerald 107 times. So the ball was spread out between the two. I honestly think that Christian Kirk, the way he played last season, he had some good games. He had some pooper games. You had him on your team for some time. I don't know if it was the whole season or not.
Christian Kirk.
Yeah. But so he was good at times. He was bad at times. I think they like him, but you don't go after a guy like DeAndre Hopkins and be okay with your slot. The way they play too, they always have every single one of their pass plays is always 4 wide receivers. So you're not going to have a situation where, Hopkins and Kirk are not on the field at the same time. They're both going to be in the slot, playing in that 4 wide receiver set. So I just think what they always referred to DeAndre Hopkins as when he was in Houston as Deshaun Watson's safety blanket. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you're going to get with Kyler Murray is that he's going to look at Larry Fitzgerald, say the guy's not open, and he's going to dump it down to DeAndre Hopkins. My concern is that are we going to see 108 targets now to give you a fair view of this, right? Christian Kirk only played in 13 games, so he probably would have gotten around 130 targets instead. Which is not far off from where DeAndre Hopkins was, to be honest. But we'll have to see if the target share is there for DeAndre Hopkins. I can't put him ahead of Tyreek because I just think Tyreek's going to have a better year next year. Yeah. But I think there is a high ceiling with DeAndre Hopkins, like you said. Like he's a guy that you can draft. It's a risk pick.
Yeah, no, it definitely is.
Because like last year I drafted Odell in the second round as like the 6th wide receiver off the board. I felt good about it, and it completely
ended up
being a bust. So that could be DeAndre Hopkins, and I'm nervous about that. It's a question of does the risk equal the reward with this guy, or would you rather take something that's more, consistent, something with a little more not consistent, but something a little more like you can trust it, you know what I mean? Instead of taking that big risk in the second round and saying, okay, I can get this guy.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree 100%.
Let's talk about Julio. You have Julio 3. I have Julio 5.
I do.
I'm just going to say Julio Jones is an old man. I think this year you're going to see the changing of the guard at wide receiver a little bit. I think Calvin Ridley, I hate this. A lot of people are going to be like, oh my God, why are you saying this? Julio Jones has been a guy that has always had his fantasy points come from yardage.
True.
Simple as that. I don't think he's going to get the 170 targets that he needs to end up in the top 3. And I think he'll probably fall in the range of what I guess Calvin Ridley got last year, which I believe was 100. Let me check. I think it was 120.
But Ridley did get hurt too, right?
He had 93 targets and missed 3 games. So he would have finished right around, I want to say,
like 120.
Yeah, 115, 120. So, but does Julio Jones still get his massive 170? Like I think 2 years ago he was the leading wide receiver in targets. It might even been 2018, which was only a year ago. So, does Julio Jones continue to get that kind of work? Because he's not going to get the touchdowns. For some friggin' reason, that offense does not throw the ball to Julio Jones in the red zone.
They try sometimes, but it's always a terrible play call.
I think Julio Jones is a little bit of a safer bet for wide receiver 1, but man, I would not be surprised if Julio Jones was 8, 9, or 10 instead of 3 or 4 or 5.
So, yeah, I mean, with Julio, there's, again, similar to Hopkins, there's a risk factor to it because of age and Calvin Ridley and stuff, and it might just be me drafting Julio every year for the last like 3 years. But, well, the
is
way
it love or is it like me with Stefan Diggs?
It's a little bit of both.
I end up with Stefan Diggs every year, even though I
didn't want to draft Julio last year.
You drafted him anyway.
But he was he was just the best player.
He played 15 games, by the way, and he had 156 targets.
Yeah, so for me, Hooper's gone. The team likes to yep, there it is. The Atlanta Falcons throw the ball. They throw the ball a lot. That is their offense. Even though they're not a great football team, they still have a very good passing attack, and they're going to continue using that. And Matt Ryan's go-to guy will always be Julio Jones. It was It was like Matt Stafford and Calvin Johnson. It's his Calvin Johnson.
Okay.
It's his security blanket. It's his guy. I don't see that stopping this year. I know Calvin Ridley is an emergence, and they're going to use him even more, which I do agree with. I think Calvin Ridley is going to get used more, but it doesn't mean Julio's not going to get used. Yeah. I think it's similar to like Godwin and Evans last year. It could be similar to that. And they only have two weapons, pretty much. Like, they're not going to throw the ball. Matt Ryan's not going to throw the ball like really anybody else. Right. It's going to be those two guys and then Todd Gurley in the running game. So that's why I still think Julio's going to get a lot of targets and still be involved. This might be his last year doing it. He is an old man, like you said. And there is, like, concerns with him, like, injury-wise. Right. He's almost always has, like, an ankle problem or something along those lines. But yeah, I think he's still Matt Ryan's guy. He's still Julio Jones, and I think he's still going to get the targets, which means he's still going to get a lot of yards and a lot of catches and a couple touchdowns.
Right. Right now, Julio's going 112, which is the fourth wide receiver off the board. Mm-hmm. That makes me nervous.
Yeah.
I honestly like Calvin Ridley over Julio Jones in my head. Obviously, value changes that. Like, I'm not going to rank Calvin Ridley 5 and move Julio Jones to wherever Calvin Ridley is.
If you think Calvin,
no. I would rather have Julio Jones, in terms of like where you're drafting. Like if you get to, like for me, if I'm an early second round pick, right? Late first, early second, and I'm sitting there at like 203 or 204 and Julio Jones is on the board. Of course I'm going to draft him. Like he's not just Matt Ryan's safety blanket. He's millions of fantasy people's safety blanket. So true. I love Julio Jones, but I do believe that there is whether it be this year or next year, Julio Jones is going to have the holy crap, Calvin Ridley's here. I'm old. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to have that slap in the face happen to him at some point.
No, I do agree. I think it'll be this year, next year too.
I think between Hopkins and Jones, I'm very like Hopkins right now is the second wide receiver according to ADP on the Fantasy Football Counselor. Fantasy Football Calculator.
Yeah.
At 107, and then you have Adams at 103. And you have Julio Jones.
103?
I'm sorry, at 109.
Oh, gosh.
He's third wide receiver off the board for Adams. And then Julio's at 112, and he's tied with Tyreek. So he's going to be that early first-round pick, which is, I think it's a good spot for him. That early second-round pick, which is a good spot for him. I'm concerned about both Hopkins and Jones.
Yeah.
Being, the guys that they were last year, because Hopkins, obviously we just discussed having a new location, a new team to play with, and a new situation. And then Julio's age is just such a question mark. I think that's why, like, Hill, Adams, Thomas, same situations, same teams. Nothing's really changed. Adams is a little bit older, but those guys are like steady rocks, and Hopkins and Jones are like, we're not really sure on them. So I think they all deserve to be in the top 5, but it's outside of the realm of.
Yeah, I don't really disagree with what you said. The only difference is I think Tyreek Hill was in the same boat as like Julio and DeAndre Hopkins for concern for me.
Right. So let's move on to the next couple guys. We'll talk about 6 and 7 quickly. So I have Amari Cooper at 6 and Chris Godwin at 7. You have Chris Godwin at 6 and Amari Cooper at 7. So let's start with Cooper. So I have, honestly, it's close between these two, but when I look at Chris Godwin and I look at Amari Cooper, I honestly think what Amari Cooper is, he's very similar to the Jones, Hopkins, Hill, Adams, Thomases of the last 3 years. Like, that's what Cooper is.
Yeah.
And I think what Chris Godwin is more closer to the Keenan Allens, the Julian Edelmans, those guys who were low-end wide receiver ones. Whereas I think Cooper, when turning it on and playing at his best, can have that top 3, season. So it's just I don't know. It's a feeling for me that Amari Cooper, he's just a different style receiver, and the style receiver he is can ascend into that top 3. So I don't see Chris Godwin having that same season and doing the same things he did this year. He's very consistent. He's very good. He's going to get the targets. He's going to get wide receiver 1 production, but he's not going to exceed what Amari Cooper is doing. I think Cooper is going to do amazing things this year. He just got to stay consistent, and that's probably going to bite me in the butt.
So yeah, I like Cooper too. Like, I tried to draft him last year. I'll probably try to draft him this year. He's the number one receiver on that team. And I like Amari Cooper. He's got a lot of talent. The only reason I have Chris Godwin ahead of him, though, right now is just because you factor in that Godwin was the number 2 wide receiver last year.
Right.
And now he's getting Tom Brady instead of Jameis Winston. And I know Tom Brady fantasy-wise is not great, and even real life he's an old man. But I think he's better than Winston. I do believe that.
Right.
And what Tom Brady's main focus is the slot receiver, as you said, a Julian Edelman.
Right.
Which will be the role that Godwin's going to fill. And I think that's only going to do wonders for Godwin because he's only like 23, I believe, maybe 24.
Yeah.
And he's still really young, and he's a very explosive guy. And if Brady just throws to him in the slot on a little like drag route or something that he gets it in space, Godwin can make a big play out of it, and he's going to get fantasy points doing that. He's going to get a lot of targets. He's going to get a lot of receptions. I don't think Godwin's going to drop off that much from this year and last year, if any. So I think that's why I have him number 6 ahead of Cooper.
I mean, that's
more consistent.
Yeah, that's not. I mean, you make valid points. I think he does have a high ceiling. Like he has the opportunity to jump higher, but I just think that Amari Cooper is probably going to be a guy that does jump higher. You know what I mean? Cooper, I believe, finished 9th, and he played 16 games. I think that the new, like you look at the new head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, Mike McCarthy. Who did he have for so many years?
Greg Jennings
and Devontae Adams at the end.
Yeah, Devontae Adams.
And he always had. There was
always a number one guy.
And always had a number one guy. Always had I think in 2015, before Adams fully came onto the scene. No, I can't find the numbers. I never can find the numbers. Why can't I find the numbers, bro?
Sheesh, I don't know.
Anyway,
but
no. So for me, I think Amari Cooper is going to be the Devontae Adams of the Dallas Cowboys.
I agree with that.
I think that there's a higher chance for a guy like Amari Cooper to finish as a top 3 wide receiver than Chris Godwin finishing as a top 3 wide receiver again. I think people are going to buy way in on Godwin. I don't know what his ADP is right now. He's 203, which is not bad. 6 wide receiver off the board. So
kind of how I view him.
Right. We both view him there. So that's a perfect spot. But the big problem for me is that when idiots start drafting, they're going to start drafting him number 3 or number 4 off the board at wide receivers. So we're going to see an uptick in him. And I don't want to invest that much stock in Chris Godwin. I think a lot of people are liking the Tom Brady change, but I think there's also going to be a realization for people because Tom Brady is 42 years old, 43, maybe older.
42, I think. I think he's 42.
So I just want to dive into Jameis Winston a little bit. No, he had 626 attempts last year. I don't think Tom Brady has thrown 326 attempts. 626 attempts and he had 613 last year. All right, maybe. That's absurd.
Yeah.
How does he do it? How does he do it? How do you do?
No
what
idea.
is he drinking?
I think he might have less passing attempts.
Avocado ice cream.
But it won't be like enough.
A drastic,
huge difference.
No, I agree.
And I think he'll probably have a better completion percentage, so it won't even matter.
Yeah. I think it's close between these two guys. Like if there was a tier 3, these guys would start it. Actually, I'd probably drop 4 guys into this tier 3, or maybe 5 or 6. But anyway, so Godwin and Cooper kind of in the same conversation. I might even move Chris Godwin up. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. So let's talk about some more guys here. I think we have a cluster of guys here at the bottom.
This is where it begins to.
So we're going to talk about, I believe, let's talk about 8, 9, and 10 and the differences here. I believe they're mostly the same. You don't have Odell.
No, I don't. I have Odell
in
13.
Your top 12. You have him 13. So let's just, I'm going to list off several guys here and we'll just discuss them. So
sure.
Mike Evans obviously has been a guy who has been obviously, I think he's usually ranked right around the same area.
Every year, yeah.
So he's extremely talented, good outside receiver. We both have this, kind of reservation on Mike Evans because as good as he is, Brady throwing him the football and how often he throws it deep is restricted. You know what I mean? Like Jameis Winston's 23, 24, 25 years old, and he can get out on the field and just sling it 100 times a game down the field. Whereas Brady does that 100 times and he's going to have his arm falling off. So
true.
I think for Evans, he will have his big games like he did last year, but I think you're seeing the way he played last year. I think you're going to see him really continue. You know what I mean? He had around 200 fantasy points. He probably would have finished in the top 7 or 8 if he played 3 more games. He missed 3 games. So if Evans plays 3 more games, he finishes, I think it's 7 or 8. And I think that's a good area for him. He's not going to exceed that. He's never exceeded that 6, 7, 8 total. He's not. He has low ceiling, high floor, consistent guy, a relatively decent draft pick. So I kind of put him 8 just for the sake of like, hey, he's here. But where did you have him?
I have him 10, so not that different than you.
He's going as 7th off the board right now.
I think he might have been able to, at some point in his career, been a top 5 fantasy wide receiver, or jumped into that top 5, top 4 discussion.
Yeah.
He just never really had the quarterback. I don't think Winston was ever ready for anything involving Mike Evans jumping up that high. But I think Evans is going to be pretty much similar to what he was last year, where he's going to have big weeks, he's going to have bad weeks. And just like how I said it's going to be a plus for Godwin that Brady's there, it might be a minus for Evans.
Yeah.
Brady's not the best deep ball thrower. He's not the worst in the league, but he's not the best. It might be the one thing Winston has over Tom Brady is deep ball accuracy, or just his arm strength in general, which is key for Evans. He makes a lot of big plays down the field. Evans is still going to be good. Brady will hit him sometimes, and it's not like that's the only thing he does do, but it is one of his big strengths. And I think Evans is just going to be a similar guy to what he was last year. Good, but not top 10, but not anything really much than that.
No, that's fair. Can you tell me, let's talk about Galladay. Can you tell me why you have Galladay ahead of Mike Evans right now?
For me, it's just I did this last year and I kind of regret it, but at the same time, it was looking good. I'm buying into that Lions offense. Matt Stafford, I think, is still in the prime of his career, and he hasn't had this good of a roster around him since the Calvin Johnson days when they made the playoffs. And he's probably a better quarterback than he was then. At least he's a much older, much more mature guy. And the first 3 or 4 games of the season last year, the Lions offense, you remember, they almost beat the Chiefs. They were scoring at will until Matt Stafford got hurt in week 5, and the whole season just fell apart. But with Kenny Galladay there, who's the other receiver Marvin Jones, Kerryon Johnson, who got another guy who got hurt very early on in the season, week 3, week 4. He's back fully healthy. If they draft somebody high in the offensive line, or even if they go defense, whatever they do, that team is emerging, I think. And I think Kenny Galladay he finished what last year? Where did he finish? 6, 7?
I believe so. Let me check it out.
And he didn't have Matt Stafford for half 6. The season.
Yeah. That's. Can I move him up? Can I move him to 8?
If you want to, but that's why I have Galladay a little higher.
So I
think I have him 8.
I have Galladay 10. I think it's just, this is one of those, because I have Odell Beckham 9 right now, and I'm concerned I'm really concerned about Marvin Jones, because last year Galladay was very good. He had some explosive games, and then he had some crap games. And Marvin Jones and Kenny Galladay kind of went back and forth.
They were the poor man's Godwin and Evans.
And it was you could end up seeing that very similar thing where Kenny Galladay ends up being like Chris Godwin this year, where people draft him. I want to pull up his ADP. He's at 207 right now. So he's back into the first round.
That's actually higher than I thought.
8th off the board. So yeah, it is pretty high, but I think Kenny Galladay's, I think he's one of those guys that people are going to sleep on a little bit. He's not you see the guys like Chris Godwin, Amari Cooper. You got AJ Brown in the conversation. DJ Moore, guys that people are like, whoa, these people are like they're going to get excited about. I think Kenny Golladay is just going to be sitting in the back seat and no one's really going to be talking about them because they're the Lions. So I think, I don't know. You make some solid, valid points. I'm just concerned about how much they throw the ball to Marvin Jones, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, and then you throwing like TJ Hawkinson, I think is going to get more involved as well. But
so I put Golladay 10 just to temper my excitement because I do love Kenny Golladay. But I put him 10 just to temper my excitement a little bit. I might move him up to 8 right next to Chris Godwin, move Evans and Odell down. Yeah. But he's extremely talented. I do want to pull up. Let me just pull this up really fast. I want to see his target totals. And we can discuss that a little bit. So last year he had 116 total targets in 16 games. That is a little bit concerning. He would have to see, I think, a jump of 35 targets for me to really get excited about him. And so if we start to see that as something that they're going to do, then that's great. But he just had an average of 7 targets a game. And so if you're going to get a guy that just, I mean, when you look at it, there were games where he was like getting 7 or 8 targets, and there were games where he's getting 9 or 10. So it's like, if he ends up like middle of the season, I think this is right around the time where Matthew Stafford went down. Was it week 11?
No, it was earlier than that.
Because he hit this point where he had like 9 targets against Chicago, and then it was 5 targets, 4 targets, 5 targets, 8, 7, 12, 4. So it's like the second half of the season, he wasn't getting targeted as much as he did in the first half. So it is a little bit concerning. Like the targets need to be there for a wide receiver to ascend into the top 5. And if they don't pass it to Kenny Golladay as much as we would like him to, then that's a concern.
Yeah.
Did you have any more points on?
No. I think that's about it.
Okay. So let's talk about DJ Moore. You have DJ Moore, if this list is correct, 8, which is, I believe, ahead of Kenny Golladay. Yeah,
I might switch to those two, but I would have him 8 or 9.
You like DJ Moore. I have DJ Moore 11. They picked up Bridgewater. Bridgewater was good with Michael Thomas, so I don't think there's a concern at quarterback for it's a lot better than it was last year for DJ Moore, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I think the system with the new head coach Matt Rule, I think you're going to see DJ Moore kind of get utilized a lot more than he was in Ron Rivera's system. But I don't know that DJ Moore is going to have this massive season next year. It's Bridgewater's first season under center full-time by himself, so there's a lot of question marks for DJ Moore coming into this season, and I'm not ready to pull him up. There's a lot of good, okay, new coach, good, new quarterback, good, right? But at the same time, it's like, is there enough there, to honestly, it's the question. It's the questions at this point. It's the fact that everything's new. Like those are good things that they're new, but it's also at the same time you're uncertain about how good a guy is going to be in a new system. And so I don't know what we're going to expect or see from DJ Moore this year. That's why I have him a little bit further down. I was going to give you the ADP before you jumped into.
Yeah,
him. Where the hell is he? Oh, 406, which is beautiful.
I love that. Yeah,
for both of us.
Now that's a Chris Godwin.
Yeah, truly
from last year.
Right.
For me with DJ Moore is, first of all, if you remember last year, he was not that great in the first half of the season, and then he just took a giant step, and he had about I think a 4 or 5 or 5 or 6 week stretch where he had 13 or 14 points every week. Let's see. I can have the list right here. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, it was 7. It was pretty much up till week 16.
Yeah.
So he had 7 straight weeks where he had 10 plus fantasy points, and half of those he had 20. I believe it was half.
Wow.
So he lit it up. And you know who his quarterback was?
No one.
It was Kyle Allen.
Yeah.
Who is now the backup
trash
in Washington.
Can. That's gross.
And now he has Teddy Bridgewater, who I don't think is anyone crazy, but he's a solid quarterback, and I think that's going to do wonders for DJ Moore.
No, that's true.
And if he had a really good quarterback, you could talk about him being like a top 5
Oh,
guy,
for sure.
This is like
coming into last year, I love DJ Moore. I still do.
Yeah.
But the problem with DJ Moore, and I said this before, is that inside a Cam Newton system, there was just there had never been that big time. Like he can't cultivate a big time wide receiver one for a Cam Newton led offense. And like you just said, there probably never will be. And so for me, DJ Moore was I like him a lot, but it was almost like a pipe dream. And you see that similar situation consistently happen in Ron Rivera's systems where they don't generally have a big time top end wide receiver one, who ends up in the top 5. But with this is what I'm saying. These new things happening for DJ Moore with Matt Rule and the quarterback, these are good things. And I think it will be a great benefit to DJ Moore, but the uncertainty there is why I have him at 11. He might move up, but I just don't, I don't know. Generally speaking, the college systems don't transfer to the NFL. And the college, very rarely do we see a college coach come in and dominate in the NFL. You know what I mean? And have success offensively or defensively or whatever it is. So that is kind of my concern a little bit with DJ Moore too, is that this offense is just not going to be able to move the ball. There's a lot of questions surrounding the Panthers because Teddy Bridgewater, honest to God, he could just completely suck. This is his third coaching staff, third team of his career. You know what I mean? Like this is
but it's the first time. Well, he kind of had it with Minnesota, but he was like a rookie. Yeah, but this is the first time since really his very beginning of his career that it's his team. They 100% believe in him. Yeah, and we'll see what he can do.
So I have Odell Beckham 9. And A.J. Brown 12, and you have, I think the difference here is that you have Juju and Thielen 11 and 12. Yeah. So I love Juju, but I'm scared.
And you absolutely have every right to be scared because of the way he played last year. He was awful.
I love Juju. So let's discuss Odell. Why do you have him 13? Just quickly because we'll probably discuss him a little bit on the next show.
It's not Odell's a great receiver, and I think the Browns are going to be better this year than last year. They're going to be really good. Actually, I think people are sleeping on the Browns, but it's not. Last year they had a lot of great weapons, and it wasn't like Odell had a lot of targets and the team just was not good. Like he didn't even have a lot of targets. It's clear Baker Mayfield's. I mean, he had a good amount of targets, but not enough for him to be like Odell Beckham Jr. Right. Baker Mayfield's guy was Jarvis Landry. That was his go-to guy. That's his security blanket. That's not going to change this year. They added more weapons. Austin Hooper's on the team. David Njoku's fully healthy. Kareem Hunt's going to be there for a full season. Nick Chubb. I like Odell Beckham, but there's just too much going on in that offense. And he's not even the favorite guy.
Right. So you're right on a lot of points. I think a lot of what was bad about the Browns last year had to do with Freddie Kitchens running the offense and the offensive line. Landry had 138 targets. You want to know, just throw out a guess of how many targets you think Odell had.
Let's say 120. Maybe.
He had 133.
Oh, he did.
So it was evenly distributed, and he was 17 targets away from having 150, which is my total that I want to get to. He was just highly. When you look at Jarvis Landry, let's just take a look at his catchable target rate of 71% for Jarvis Landry. Odell's catchable target rate last year was 74%, which is a little bit surprising. They had a habit of not throwing the ball in the red zone to Odell Beckham. He had 4 total touchdowns last year, whereas Jarvis Landry had
a few more.
6 total touchdowns, and he had 12 red zone receptions as opposed to, I think, Odell's 6. So
that has to change.
Yeah, that has to change. But I think Odell, he had 74 receptions, which is not great. That he needs to catch more balls if he's going to. He was number 2 in deep targets, which I believe is 20 plus yards down the field. He was number 2 with 31. So he basically one slot away from leading the lead in deep targets. He had 133 targets on the season, which was number 12. The only thing he didn't really finish well with is total touchdowns. Mm-hmm. He had a 5.4 touchdown rate, which is terrible. So I think what your point is that last year the Browns just sucked, and that people are going to sleep on the Browns, and they're going to get better this year in a system with Kevin Stefanski. But I think you're going to see Odell catch a lot more balls this year and a lot more touchdowns. If he reaches a 10 touchdown total, that's 60 more fantasy points to add to his total on what he had last year. So do you think
he will get 10 receiving touchdowns?
Yeah, I do.
See, I don't know. I think, especially in the red zone with Hooper and Njoku both there at the tight end, they're going to look for that. Yeah. That's Hooper's biggest strength is red zone targets. Right. I think Landry's still going to have about 6 touchdowns. I think Odell's going to have more than 4.
Right.
But I don't know if he's going to hit 10.
Now, I just want to give you these numbers. Okay.
Unless Baker would have to have a great season for that.
Odell finished as the wide receiver freaking 26.
Yes.
Hold on a second. It just, the page flipped on me.
He was not good last year.
No, he was not good. He finished as the wide receiver 26. Sorry, my page reloaded, and I had Antonio Brown as the wide receiver 1. Not really sure what year that was. Said it was 2019. So he had 164 fantasy points. Only 4 touchdowns. Now, basically, you could say, I wish I had that chart in front of me, but I made a chart where I broke down fantasy points by column. So how many fantasy points a player had by yards, how many fantasy points a player had by touchdowns, receptions, yada, yada, yada. I want to see where Odell ranked in the yardage category, because if you take his 4 touchdowns away in half PPR, just yards and receptions, if you take his 4 touchdowns away, he has 144 fantasy points, which is basically a wide receiver 36. He's Curtis Samuel. You add the 4 touchdowns, he jumps to wide receiver 26, right? You add 6 more touchdowns, which I don't think is unfeasible for Odell Beckham next year.
Not unfeasible. Definitely not unfeasible. Yeah.
He gets 60 more fantasy points. Or no, he gets, 6 times 6 is what, 36?
Yes.
He gets 30 more fantasy points, which puts him in the top 12. So I think for me, it is not unfeasible for him to catch 6 more touchdowns, and it's not even unfeasible to see him catch more receptions. If he gets up to 85 to 90 receptions with 10 total touchdowns and 1,200 receiving yards, he's in the top 10 for wide receivers. So I think it is concerning. You make some valid points with Jarvis Landry, but I think Jarvis Landry was just more hyper efficient in the touchdown category than Odell was.
No,
I don't think it really has anything to do with, I think the conception for a lot of people is, he threw it to Jarvis Landry a lot more than Odell.
Well,
which is not the case.
He did throw to Odell. I mean, how many more targets was it? It wasn't a lot, but it was
5
close.
More targets.
So there was a lot of talk that they were forcing the ball to Odell a lot.
Yeah.
When Baker just dropped back and threw the ball, it was typically and the guy was open, it was typically Jarvis Landry.
Right.
There was a lot of forced passes to Odell. Not all the time, but it did seem like, and the chemistry between Baker and Odell, it doesn't seem like it's great either.
Right.
But no, you make good points. If Odell can get that 10 touchdown mark, I think there's a good chance he'll also get a couple more receptions, which would put him around the top 10.
10 touchdowns would get him into the top 5. So
really
10 more touchdowns on what he had last year, which would be a 14 touchdown
14,
total. Yeah. I think that's how they wanted to utilize him.
If Odell gets 14 touchdowns, though, that means Mayfield's going to throw for close to 40, and I do not see that happening.
But the cluster freaking Cleveland after the season, just go look up, just search in Google Browns and Freddie Kitchens coaching problems, and you'll get a ton of articles about people inside the organization saying that it was an absolute mess, that they would go into a game, right? And the offensive coordinator and Freddie Kitchens would spend all week planning a game plan, right? For a particular game. They would spend the entire week game planning. And then Freddie Kitchens would get there the day of the game, scrap the whole game plan, and start from scratch that morning. And the whole team would be like, what the heck are you doing? And it's like you spend a whole week of planning, preparation, practicing on this one game plan, and then you scrap it and you do this. And then he was like,
"That's terrible."
He was discounting the offensive coordinator. It was a cluster in Cleveland with Freddie Kitchens leading the team. Just go look it up. You'll figure it out real fast. I think Stefanski's he's going to be much more respected in that locker room. He's going to be much more of a valuable piece offensively. It does concern me that he was in a system with, what's his name, the assistant head coach of the Vikings, who likes to run the ball down through people's throats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if they run it with Chubb 60 times in a game, I'm going to be a little bit concerned. But I think the offense is going to be more efficient next year, more highly efficient.
I agree. Yep.
And it's going to be they interviewed Kevin Stefanski the year before and gave the job to Freddie Kitchens. So they already know like what they wanted. That's probably why they hired Stefanski so quickly after this whole situation went down with Kitchens. So I think it's going to be much better prepared. The team's going to be a lot better this year. And I think you're going to see Odell utilize the way that he should have been utilized in the offense instead of the way that he was. It was like, okay, well, let's go out and throw out our game plan. And then they're like, okay, well, what is this? That time I was screwed with Baker a lot. Like, there's a reason why he sucked.
So this is another issue, though.
I'm like a Browns, like, what do they call it? A Browns local reporter getting really pissed on talk show radio.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. But with the new coach, he does want to run the football a lot.
Yeah.
So they're going to run Chubb's going to get a lot. I think they'll involve Kareem Hunt a lot. Probably more than they did last year, and they did a decent amount last year. I mean, how good of a year do you think Baker Mayfield's going to? Even if Baker Mayfield has what we hope he can be and what we think he can be and has a very good year, he's not gonna win the MVP. I don't think he's gonna throw like 40 touchdowns and go off. Like at absolute best, I could see like 30 touchdowns and like 10 interceptions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which I don't see Odell getting 10 of the 30.
Okay.
With those weapons.
Let's move on to can you quickly explain why you have Juju 11?
Yeah, I'll just really quickly. I think Juju last year was going to be arguably a top 5 guy. Yeah. Roethlisberger did not play a single. Did he play a single? No, he did not.
He played one game. He hurt his shoulder in the first one. No, he played. He played one full game against the Patriots.
Oh, he did play that game.
And then he got hurt in the second game, and it was Mason
didn't he get
Rudolph
hurt in the game against the Patriots?
Duck Hodges. I don't remember, to be honest with you.
So it was either way one game with Roethlisberger.
Either way, Juju had no games with Roethlisberger.
Right. And I think that's going to, even though I don't really like Roethlisberger anymore at this point in his career, I still think he's better than Mason Rudolph and Duck. So I do think Juju and the Steelers now know how to use him as well. Right. I think Juju's going to have a very underrated season. People are going to kind of forget about him. Mm-hmm. He's going to have a really good year, I think, playing under Roethlisberger, and maybe even another quarterback if they bring in a Jameis Winston or they draft somebody.
Yeah. I love Juju. You know how I feel about Juju. I think the way – so here's the big issue with Juju Smith-Schuster last year. That first game is really all we saw from Juju Smith-Schuster. And – what's his name? Ben Roethlisberger. And it was very concerning that first game because I remember I was trying to go after him and I was like, well, what's going on? He faced Stephon Gilmore. He had 8 targets, 6 receptions, 78 yards. He had a good game in terms of, in half PPR, he had 10 fantasy points. So he had a good game. No receptions in the end zone, but he looked, even in the preseason games when Ben Roethlisberger was in the game, he looked good with Big Ben. The problem is Juju basically was in the first month of the season or first 5 or 6 games, he was being utilized the same as Antonio Brown. And he's not that type of receiver. He's a slot receiver. And so after like 5 games, Mike Tomlin was like, oh, we got to put Juju back in the slot. So for me, I was like, oh, I'm all excited. I'm like, okay, they're putting Juju back in the slot. It took him this long to realize that he's a freaking slot receiver. And so they finally do that. And he didn't produce because the freaking quarterback's below. So I think him in the slot with Big Ben is really good news. And I think he's going to be kind of a safety blanket for Big Ben. And I think he's going to have a great season. I don't know where I'm going to rank him. I don't know yet. I haven't decided.
I mean, that's the one game we have to go off of, which was the first game of the season.
Right. And you had a touchdown and it's like a 16, 17 point game.
6 catches for 75 yards. Was that what it was?
Yeah.
Against Stephon Gilmore is actually one of the best that, like, other than Devontae Parker, like, that might be the best wide receiver game. I remember Gilmore shut down a lot of guys, including a notable one was Amari Cooper. I don't think had a single catch against him. So the fact that he had 6 catches for 75 yards is actually pretty good.
No, right.
I think Juju would have had a decent year last year.
I might move Juju up. I really do. I don't have the consensus in front of me, so I don't know where Juju's supposed to be. But
I think it's around like 13.
Then you have Thielen 12.
Yeah, and that's mostly off of with Diggs gone. I think Thielen's going to be getting a lot of targets, a lot.
I agree. I think actually Thielen could take a massive leap this year. There were times where he was down last year and in seasons before, and he was injured a lot. Last year too. So I think, for right now, I'm trying to find Thielen. Where are you, Thielen? ADP is 310, which is good. People are taking Keenan Allen ahead of him right now, so I would for sure have Adam Thielen ahead of Keenan Allen.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I like I like Adam Thielen a lot. He'll probably be 13, 14 for me. Juju will probably be 13, 14 for me. But I did want to mention, so you have Adam Thielen, just to recap, at 12?
Yes.
My 12th guy is A.J. Brown. I just love A.J. Brown. I'm really excited about him this year, and this is probably going to burn me. He's my Juju this year.
Yeah.
So I really love A.J. Brown. I think he's extremely talented. I think he's a guy that people kind of slept on last year. Going into the season, everyone was looking at guys like Hollywood Brown. They were looking at guys like, who's the other young wide receiver? Can't remember his name.
Deebo Samuel as well.
Yeah. But people were looking
N'Keal Harry.
Yeah, N'Keal Harry. People were looking at different wide receivers. AJ Brown was I think he was like
DK Metcalf as well.
Yeah, I think Brown was a guy that wasn't really looked at, and he came out and dominated last year. And I think he's very good. And I think that this year coming into the season, I think he's going to be a guy that gets 7 to 10 targets a game, and I think he can be a top 12 wide receiver for sure. So that's why I kind of have him in my top 12. Right now, AJ Brown is going 507. So on my board, he's about 14 picks higher.
That's
14 slots higher than
good
normal.
Value right there.
So it's a really good value, and you can push that back. But
I think AJ Brown definitely has the talent to be in the top 12. There's just too many question marks for me right now to put him there.
Okay. That sounds good. That'll do it for our top 12. To recap, I have Thomas 1, Adams 2, Hill 3, Hopkins 4, Julio 5, Cooper 6, Godwin 7, Evans 8, Beckham Jr. 9, Galladay 10, Moore 11, and Brown 12. What do you got, boss?
I have Thomas 1, Devontae Adams 2, Julio Jones 3, DeAndre Hopkins 4, Tyreek Hill 5, Chris Godwin 6, Amari Cooper 7, DJ Moore 8, Kenny Galladay 9, Mike Evans 10, Juju Smith-Schuster 11, and Adam Thielen at 12.
And that'll do it for the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. This list is going to change for sure.
Oh yeah, it always does.
Don't forget to check out our website at thefantasychampions.com. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and we'll talk to you on Thursday, Fantasy Champs.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Twitter at @TheFFChamps.